Welcome to the Daily Agenda. It's completely unequivocal now that there is a major swing in process to ethnonationalism. What's the cause of it? Well, it's an ongoing battle, partly with the centre-right, who are actually the centre-left, using far-left attack lines and their lexicon, which really makes them what? Centre-left or far-left? Hybridisation going on there, but they're definitely not right-wing. I think the only people on the right really are nationalists, certainly ethno-nationalists. But in truth, I mean, this is an important point to make. Sorry, it's those hand signals again. They're just involuntarily, they just happen. They're spasms, I need to get paranoid about them and smoke some better shit. We're going to have some fun on this channel, haven't we, whilst we're dealing with all these muppets, quite frankly. But yes, absolutely. It's an important distinction to make that, as I said before, in the British National Party, we never really regarded ourselves as being ethno-nationalists. It was just a given. Now, you see, because of the emergence of all of these factions, these so-called centre-right factions, actually they're all centre-left. And then, of course, you've got Golding with his Britain First, is it? Organisation, which is not an ethno-nationalist party, which he himself admits. It's definitely centre-right, without a doubt. They don't indulge in the so much of the far-left attack lines as the definite centre-left, like Tommy Robinson's, fanboys, like Liam Tufts, etc., et al. They're all at it, in actual fact. Connor Tomlinson, all the containment characters, they're all at it, whilst pretending to be right-wing. Civic nationalism is just leftism. And I think that was an important point Tucker Carlson made as well, really, when he said that, the Zionist right in inverted commas, is behaving just like the left. Well, that's because, they are the left. And they're expected to behave in exactly the same way as leftists do, and to espouse exactly the same ideology, while the actual Jewish Zionists at the top of the pyramid scam promote Jewish ethno-nationalism. And we're here promoting white ethno-nationalism, aren't we? And it's terrible and wrong, according to these Jewish ethno-nationalists. Why is that? Why can only they promote ethno-nationalism and not us? Not that we actually care what they think, and we don't need their permission. We couldn't care less. We intend to bring down their foreign occupation governments in every nation that they've occupied. End of. That is our policy. That's our position. That's what we're wholly committed to. And the big swing to ethno-nationalism is one of the ways in which we're going to do it. Now, the big misnomer is that one or two factions are responsible for this swing. They're not at all. Look, remigration is a synonym of repatriation. As I explained to an American earlier when he was ranting in favour of ethno-nationalism and against Zog, which is a very old term to use, and he was ranting, oh, this is all the boomers who believe this. Well, no, in actual fact, because it was those boomers, and I'm not one. I'm Yes, I'm not one of those boomers. I'm Gen X, and not that it matters an awful lot. In like 2 or 3 years, that puts me inside Gen X. Those boomers, in actual fact, that started the whole campaign. They crafted it, led it in the most difficult times possible against Zog, which means, as you know, Zionist occupation government, IPAC. IPAC is the most sensible thing to call it today. But he was ranting about ethno-nationalism, opposing Zog, etc., blah, 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 and then got to Christ is King. Oh, my goodness. Honestly, how on earth can we work with these people? The simple truth is, we can't. Christian fundamentalists? No, absolutely not. Christians, quite frankly, I spoke to a couple yesterday when I was out recording in the countryside, and one of them said, well, as long as all of these Africans that are coming into the country are Christians, then I'm not bothered. Why is that? So 50 million Africans could come into the country, but as long as they're African, she's not bothered because they're Christians. Well, doesn't that show you what serious problem we have with Christianity, because in actual fact it's proto-communism, committed to exactly the same principles as the left and Zog. Am I wrong? Well, I'm sure there'll be quite a few people ranting again as usual, but that is my position, and I told her so. Her husband, however, was much more receptive to what I had to say, although she was whining and whinging, repeatedly about immigration as well, but then made ridiculous comments of that nature. I couldn't care less whether they're Christians or not. They are not nativists. The very essence of ethno-nationalism is nativism. Okay? And so to say that any one person is responsible for this major swing towards ethno-nationalism, it simply isn't true. It's a teamwork. It's a group effort. We've all made this happen. All of the campaigners for nationalism and ethno-nationalism and repatriation and remigration. Just remember, remigration is a very recent term. I don't remember any of these little Zoomers being around in 2009 when the British National Party won 1 million votes promoting repatriation. Remigration, synonymous? Yes, of course. They're nowhere near at that state yet, are they? But the whole purpose of tonight's video is not to have some sort of celebration of any description, because I said this after the EU ref, on the very night of the EU ref victory in actual fact, and the next night in particular. Why is everyone celebrating? Now comes the most difficult part, the enforcement. And that's a very similar situation that we're facing right now. Yes, there is a definite swing towards nationalism, and it's quite significant. That's the reason why everyone's ranting about it. Everyone on the so-called centre-right's ranting about it. The Labour Party's ranting about it. The far left are ranting about it. The Zionists are ranting about it, because they're all shitting themselves. They're all shitting themselves because ethno-nationalism is completely distinct from all of those cousin groups. All of those groups are cousins. Ideologically, they're cousins. They're ideologically related. Every single one of them. They have their cosmetic differences, but that's all they are. There's no major fundamental difference between them, other than with the Ziobots promoting Israel and the traditional left promoting Palestine. That's a major area of division, and that's about it, quite frankly. In every other way, they're just the same. Absolutely. Everyone who claims to be centre-right in actual fact is a leftist. So, in essence, I think a cause célèbre, ethno-nationalism, not quite there yet. Remigration is getting there, certainly. It's probably at the halfway stage that the push for an EU ref was. And we all know where that ended up. And remigration must not end up in exactly the same way. It can never be taken over by the rotten establishment or the institutionally corrupt centre-right, because we all know what will happen. It will be buried by design, because that's all they do. Yes, I think we should have learned that by now. Well, I knew that years ago. I warned everyone on the night after the EU ref never to trust anyone in the establishment, including fake Farage, and not to hand power back to them, but to seize power and enforce Brexit, because that was the only way it was going to be done. Very few people listened. A few thousand did, tens of thousands, and they actually joined Stronger How, which I led. And I'm very proud of that organisation. It was one of the best things I've ever done in political campaigning, because let's face it, no one else in ethno-nationalism did a single thing during the campaign for Brexit and afterwards to enforce it. It was all left to the so-called centre-right. That's why it all went tits up. That's why it was a disaster. That's why there is no Brexit. There is only Bruno. Brexit in name only. Okay? And we do not want remigration in name only, do we? No. We want mass remigration to succeed. In particular, I want the 95% white supermajority policy to succeed. But, if we're going to start saying it's this person, that person, the other person, this faction, that faction, they're responsible, it's just nonsense. All of it is nonsense. It's cumulative. It's cumulative. It's built up decade after decade after decade after decade until we've now reached this point where, I can remember 7 years ago when ethno-nationalism was, when I first saw the term being used on Gab, how virulently detested and hated it was. I was like, people almost spat on the term ethno-nationalism. Now it's becoming commonplace. It's entering into the popular imagination, as it were. And when that happens, you then start to make progress. And the reason why we know ethno-nationalism is progressing is primarily because the centre-right, so-called, are absolutely foaming at the mouth about it. Look at all the paid actors like Tenconi, another Christian crank, David Koresh II, ranting around the clock about ethno-nationalism. They're all ranting about it. Liam Tuff's ranting about it. Richard Imam, Paul Thorpe, although apparently he seemed much more uncomfortable about slagging off ethno-nationalism, probably because there might be just some deep-seated sympathy towards what we actually believe. Because in truth, this battle is going to be won by ethno-nationalists. But what I will say is this: no one person is responsible for this. It's everyone who has actually put their head above the parapet for decades to push repatriation and remigration. They have caused this swing to ethno-nationalism. And you must remember that there have always been swings to and from ethno-nationalism, so-called as it's known today. We used to call it just nationalism. But this time, because this really is the last chance saloon before primary balkanisation, we cannot allow the pendulum to swing back into their favour and for them to seize control over it. I'm talking about the enemy. We know the enemy. We know who the enemy is, don't we? Surely we do. We do. We all know who the enemy is. Okay? We cannot allow that to happen. So therefore, there's no room for egomania of any description here. I'm not really into egomania. I just tell people straight the way it is. They don't like it, tough. Who cares? I don't. So look, I don't want to say any one person is better than that person, and this person's done this and that person's done that. Everyone has contributed what they could to the campaign for ethno-nationalism, and now it's succeeding. However, the dire warning that I need to leave everyone with tonight before I close this podcast is the necessity to build a concentric organisation to take forward this surge to ethno-nationalism. And that's what we now have to decide what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what organisation is going to do it. Because in truth, I can't see any organisation at this moment in time, unless we get control of the British National Party again, that can actually take forward the campaign for ethno-nationalism, for remigration, and to capitalise on that massive swing. And the British National Party is a brand name, it's a household name, it's commonly known. All it needs is to be rebranded, refocused, remodelled. Any negative associations it had in the past, created mainly by the mainstream media, will soon evaporate. And so that's what I want all nationalists to focus on tonight. If you're serious, truly, about making the remigration policy work, about the triumph of nationalism, ethno-nationalism, then get away from these Christian cranks and the Natsok cranks, quite frankly, and rejoin the British National Party. And once they're there in significant numbers, and I know lots of people have already rejoined, then we'll topple Jefferson and Walker. If they don't want to hand over the reins voluntarily, we'll just remove them with people power. It really is that simple. And that's what I would advise you to do, because this surge towards ethno-nationalism has got to be capitalised on. It has got to be marshalled into the right direction. And I just can't see any of these other groups being capable of doing it. Not the Homeland Party, that's stagnant water. Patriotic Alternative, placard protest group, Hitler simping. No thanks. It's not tenable. None of that stuff is tenable. Alex Sherbury, crank magnet. No thank you. Go away. Carry on being Adolf Hitler in your caricature waxwork mind. What we need is serious campaigning and a serious organisation to carry forward the ethno-nationalist campaign for remigration. But in truth, we are winning. We are winning ideologically. And on the ideological point, I think it's now perfectly clear that the so-called centre-right has lost that battle completely, because month after month after month after month on here, I've been hammering home the message about them really being centre left and explaining why. And on X, formerly Twitter, I've been doing it for years, many, many years. You know, right back to 2011, I've been on their case, hammering home that message. And even before that, right back to 2008, in truth, although not to the same extent as I did from 2011 onwards. But yeah, it's working. We are succeeding. There's still a great deal of work more to be done, and it has to be done, and it's going to be done. But we need a serious organisation, a brand name like the British National Party, to take it forward. So that's my advice to you. If you don't think that's the way to do things, then go and join someone else. But that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do to take forward the campaign for remigration and ethnonationalism by retaking control of the British National Party. Join us. Thank you for tuning in.